afternoon. Okay, hands up if you're still awake after lunch. That's good. I'm going to start by doing something I often do, which is I'm going to take a picture of the audience to see if you're still awake at this time of the day. Bear with me one sec. All right, give me a hand. That's it. Nice. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. So thanks for joining me today. Just checking the slides are showing. There we go. So we have 30 minutes to cover a topic that's quite comprehensive. So I'm going to do my best. We have a lot of content to cover, so bear with me. A lot of familiar faces in the room. It's nice to see you. For those of you I don't know, my name is Perrine Farque. I'm an author, a speaker, and I specialize on diversity and inclusion in the workplace, essentially. Today, like I said, a vast agenda, so let's get started. A lot of things to cover. We're going to cover beyond gender. What does it mean in the workplace to be inclusive of everyone beyond just gender? So where I'd like to start with you is microaggressions. I suspect a few of you have heard of microaggressions before, maybe not everyone. So it's worth reminding all of us what this is about. And also, I like to talk, one of the topics that's dear to my heart is language, red flag language, what to say, what not to say. So I want to start with microaggression often made to women, because this is a women in business event and a women in tech event. And I can see a lot of women in the audience, not only. So how many of you have heard before in the workplace, at work, things like, you're prettier when you smile? Show of hands. Wow, okay, that's quite a few, all right. Or how many of you at work, asking women in the room, you feel you've never had substantial interaction about your work with leadership? Show of hand. How many do you think you haven't had you don't have often substantial interaction with leadership about your work? Quite a few, okay. So this is quite common in the workplace. And I like to share studies as well and research to support what I'm saying. So in this case, there is a great research by McKinsey that's supporting the fact that often women in the workplace, they don't have substantial interaction as much as men in the workplace have with leadership about their work. But like I said, I don't want to focus this presentation only on women, so I want to talk about parents. So by show of hands, how many parents do we have in the room? Parents? Wow, quite a few, okay. So parents also, men and women, can also be on the receiving end of microaggression. So again, how many of you have heard things like they wouldn't want the promotion because of the travel if they have children? I can see a few of you nodding, yes, right? A few of you raising hands. So, and it's not just, again, it's not just something I say. There is research out there. For example, there is a recent research by Women in Data and Pregnant Then Screwed from 2023 that showed that over half of all mothers have faced some form of discrimination when pregnant, on maternity leave, or when they return. So again, parents can also be on the receiving end of microaggressions. And just one last example I want to share with you is non-white people. I think I've heard a couple of sessions this morning around people of color, etc. And some of the frequent microaggressions they might be facing at work are things like they have to prove themselves more than their white counterparts. So for example, there is a recent survey by McKinsey and Company called Women in the Workplace 2022 that found that 42% of black women needed to provide more evidence of their competencies than others, compared to 16% of all men. So it's the numbers are quite significant. There's a big difference again. So you can see it's not just women, it's not just parents, it's not just black women. There's a lot of different people who might be on the receiving end of microaggressions in the workplace. I love my numbers. I'm going to share a few numbers with you. This is a survey by McKinsey and Company called Women in the Workplace 2022, so it's quite recent. So what they've done is they've asked questions to people in the workplace, and they split the results by groups. I know you can't read very well, so I'm going to read the first one for you. So they've asked people, have you had your judgment questioned in your area of expertise at work? And out of that question, they found that 27% of men said, yes, I've had my judgment questioned in my area of expertise, versus 36% of women. So again, you can see there's quite a big gap in how women experience being at work versus men. But you can see the numbers are even more different for Asian women, for example, Latinas and black women. In fact, black women are the group that most significantly have said they've had their judgment questioned in their area of expertise at work, versus 27% of all men. So you can see there's quite a big difference. I'm just going to read some of the other questions for you. I think the second one is interesting because you have quite a big gap. So the second question they've asked is, how many of you needed to provide more evidence of their competency than others did? 16% of men said they had to provide more evidence of their competency than others, versus 31% of all women. And again, versus 42% of black women. So the point I'm making here is the experience we feel at work can vary widely depending on which gender we are, which color we are, and even our sexual orientation. More data. Feel free to take some pictures, but I'm just walking through that. So, in summary, microaggressions, how do they impact someone's career? Well, in a couple of different ways. Number one, they can affect someone's mental health over time. So, sort of having a feeling of burnout. They can also contribute to unlikelihood of promotion, toxic work environments, unequal pay. And finally, they lead to low job satisfaction, imposter syndrome. So it's really hard to retain employees when they feel they're not included at work. Some of the ways some people might behave when they are on the receiving end of microaggression, they might either overperform. So raise your hand if you feel you often overperform because maybe there is imposter syndrome. I think, quite a few of you. So you feel you constantly have to prove yourself, constantly have to over-prepare. I know a lot of women in the room, when you have a presentation, you will stay up late the night before, make sure everything is perfect, sort of, over-preparing, overworking. And that leads to a feeling of burnout. But some other people, they might do the opposite. They might underperform. They might do things like flying under the radar, do the bare minimum. Maybe they don't speak up in meetings because they just don't want to be part of this toxic environment. Or sometimes some people might procrastinate. They might avoid taking on a new opportunity at work, or they might end up in a perpetual state of inaction, never starting or never finishing something. And what are some of the harmful impacts of microaggression at work? Well, like I mentioned before, it can lead to a toxic environment. It can disrupt productive team dynamics. How many of you have at work felt that maybe it was not as productive as it could be because of microaggression, and some groups were not as included as others? Again, I see quite a few of you. Yeah. Or even it can obstruct effective leadership. It's really hard to be an effective leader, an effective mentor when there's a lot of microaggression in the workplace. So some of the, what can we do? Okay, what can we do to avoid microaggressions in the workplace? There are quite a few simple steps that we can all take. So number one, accepting that microaggressions are real. Some people may feel that microaggressions are an exaggeration, they don't really exist, they haven't seen them, so therefore it can't exist. So really the first step is accepting they're real. And if some colleagues don't believe you, you can share some of the data I've just shared with you. Then you can do things like creating a forum for discussion. Host discussion groups, host a lunch and learn on a Friday around microaggression, what they look like, things like that. And finally, stand up against microaggression. I know that one is hard because sometimes when you're witnessing something at work that's microaggression, it can be hard because you might not know where to start. But if you take the first step and say, hey, that's not okay, or hey, that joke was not funny, things like that, you set the tone and other people will follow you. So that's very important. I talked to you about language. red flag, what I call red flag language at work. And I'm going to let you read here some of the most common red flag language phrases you might have heard at work. How many of you have heard at work, she or he wouldn't be a culture fit? A show of hands. Quite a few, yeah. I think sometimes I get the question, wait a minute, why is this a red flag language? Like, why that person is not a culture fit? Well, the very fact that we mention culture fits, it's assuming that there is a certain mold, a certain stereotype that everybody has to fit into. So instead of talking about culture fit, I always like to talk about culture add. What do they have that we don't have in the team? What can they bring to the table that we don't have? So those are some of the common red flag language that, if you hear them, that should raise a little red flag in your mind, and you should probably have a discussion with your team about that. I think it's really important to also talk about positive intent, because often people say, well, okay, that person made a joke at work which, offended the other person, but, he or she had very good intention. So if she had good intention when she made a joke, that's okay. The problem with that is that we almost give people a get out of jail free card. So it's almost, okay, they can do it again and again and again because they have good intention. So that doesn't really help. Instead of focusing on positive intention, we should really set the rule around demonstrating positive behavior in action. I want to talk a little bit about meetings in the workplace because that's where most of us spend our time in meetings. Love them or hate them, we do a lot of meetings. And I want to share this statistic with you. It's a survey from 2017 called Justice Interrupted, the Effect of Gender. And so what they did, they observed the Supreme Court in the US, and they found that in that study, analyzing hearings of US Supreme Court, they found that women judges were interrupted 3 times more often than men, and that women initiated only 4% of the interruption. So interruptions in the workplace are a real thing, even in the US Supreme Court. So things we can all do to help to improve these sorts of dynamics is, one, when someone is interrupted, just say you would like to hear them finish. It's quite straightforward. So if you see someone is getting interrupted, I'll just say, wait a minute, I'd like to hear him or her finish. If you see someone struggling to get into the conversation, say you'd like to hear their point of view. That one I've seen is very efficient. Just say, can I hear what Helen thinks about that? It's pretty straightforward. If you see someone who is a repeat offender, someone who interrupts a lot in meeting, maybe take them aside after the meeting and talk to them about that. Hey, I've noticed, sometimes you interrupt people and some people struggle. Is there something we can do about that? Or you can also, some people they nominate a gatekeeper to keep the conversation on track. To say, all right, let that person finish. Those are just a few ideas to push back on interruptions. How many of you have heard the term idea hijacking? Show of hand. Okay, some of you, okay. So for those of you who have not heard of it before, it's, let's say, a person of color or a woman say something insightful in a meeting, only to have it dismissed or ignored. And the same idea is repeated by someone else after, and everybody praises the idea. That's idea hijacking, and that does happen in meetings. So again, the idea here is to try and repeat ideas from people from previous meetings, and really create a culture of credit, even if the person is not in the room. So give credit to the project owner often, and that's going to create that sort of culture of credit. Now we talked about meetings, so I'd like to talk about sort of meeting house work and misdirected questions. So meeting house work, things like taking notes, scheduling a follow-up meeting, clearing coffee cups after a meeting. Women tend to absorb a lot of these tasks. I know I've done a lot of that. I've taken notes, I've scheduled the next meetings. I even volunteered. I often volunteer to do that. So the problem with that is that not only is it not part of the job description, but people who do that over and over, it affects their career because they have less time to focus on their actual work. And it ends up also sort of the perception that their colleagues have is that they are just the note taker, they are just the meeting scheduler. So it really doesn't help with the respect at work. So, and it's the same for misdirected question. Sometimes people who are the experts in a specific topic in a meeting, they get asked questions about another topic just to be tested. So things like that is worth noticing them, being aware of them, so that we can take action and create a more inclusive environment. So I've covered a lot, so I just want to do a quick checklist with you. Things you can do, amplify and advocate in meetings, cultivate a culture of credit, challenge yourself to notice and take action when interruptions happen. Encourage everybody to identify the originator of the ideas, push back on off-topic questions, and take note of how attendees arrange themselves in meeting room. So when you start doing that, you start becoming an ally. So becoming an ally to people who need support in the workplace. And I want to talk to you about the 7 types of allyships, because there are different ways you can show up as an ally in the workplace, or there are different ways people can show up to you as an ally in the workplace, and how you can become one. So some of the characteristics or traits of some of the best allies I know, they constantly learn. Like they come to this event and they sit in this room and they listen to sessions like this. They understand that their perspectives are shaped by their own experience. They learn other perspectives and they adjust their mindset. And they are open to learning, improving, and changing their opinions. So those are some things you can start thinking about, for example. And I just want to share with you different ways you or your colleagues can show up to you as an ally to support them. Some people have different personalities. Some people are more extroverts. Maybe they'll be more sponsors or champions or upstanders, meaning that they will be very vocal in meetings, they will advocate for someone to be promoted, etc. Some people are more introverts, and maybe the way they can show up as allies, they can be confident, they can create a safe space to speak. Or some people are scholars, so they like to learn, so they will learn from people who are from a different gender, a different ethnic background, different age group, etc. Those are just the reason I'm sharing that with you is you can pick and choose which one comes more naturally to you and which one you think you can work on. And because this is a Women in Tech event and this is a Women in Business event, I'm just going to show some ways that you can show up to be a great ally to women. Women can support women, men can support women. So things you can do is you can listen to them, speak up for them, learn about them, sponsor them, champion them, amplify their voices, advocate for them, and create a safe space for them. So as you can see, there are lots of different ways you can show up. I want to spend just 1 minute to talk about paying attention. So why do I talk about paying attention? Because in allyship, it's really important to create an inclusive space. But the trouble is that we are, as human beings, we're hardwired to spend time with people who are just like us. When I look at my group of friends I spend the most time with, they are the same age as me, they are the same gender as me, they have the same background as me, they have the same socio-economic background as me, because it's called convenience network. We all do that, we all have a tendency to do that, and so it's easy, it's convenient, that's what we do. The trouble with that is it doesn't really help us challenge some of the biases we have. And I have bias. Sometimes I catch myself saying, why do I think this way? Maybe it's because I haven't spent enough time with these people. So the idea is to try and be more intentional about creating a more diverse network of people in the workplace and outside of the workplace. Because diverse networks reduce implicit bias. So I hope, as I say that, some of you are thinking in your head, okay, who do I spend most of the time with? You're probably thinking, okay, maybe I could diversify a bit my network. Like I said to you, I'm guilty of having quite a homogeneous network, and I'm trying to be more intentional about diversifying my own network. And sometimes I've heard, the importance of engaging men to champion women in the workplace. And I can see a few men in the audience, so thank you. We need you. Thank you for coming. Why is it important to engage men to champion women at work? Because this makes the campaign inclusive. You know, the world is going through a lot at the moment. There's a lot of things happening out there, and I think if we were all a little bit more inclusive and if we all spend more time together, I think the workplace would be probably a bit better. And so I like to think about men championing women because we need men to be part of the cause. It also helps redistribute power in both the personal but also professional lives. And also, it increases the likelihood of the future generation to grow up in a more gender equitable society. So it's super important to include men in the conversation. And sometimes I have the question, men ask me, is it okay if I attend a women event? Well, look around you. The answer is yes. We have quite a few men who came to this event today, Women in Tech, Women in Business. And this is definitely the right thing to do. It does demonstrate your support to women. It helps you build more empathy. I'm sure you've learned, looking at the men here, raise your hand if you've learned something about women in tech, women in business today. Don't be shy. Yes, you have. Great. So it helps demonstrate your support, build empathy, diversify your network. I hope you made new friends today and you're going to stay in touch with them after the event and spot talents. So some of the things to do just to make sure, of course, if you're going to join a group, for example, a women in tech group, you know, ask them, is it okay if I join? Be clear on your intentions. I'm here to learn and become a better ally, and be prepared to listen and learn. We talked about diversifying your network, so I won't spend too much time on that. And I just want to end up on top strategies to champion women at work. We talked about inclusive language. I know a lot of people use guys every day, and I even use guys at home. But the problem with using guys when you address a mixed group of men and women is that it's actually not that inclusive. So for example, if you're a woman in the room and you go to a restaurant and you want to go to the bathroom and you see a sign that says guys, would you go in? Not so much. So you can see the point about, you know, hi guys, sounds like it's innocent, but actually be a bit more inclusive, say hi everyone, hi team, things like that. They are very subtle, but they really build up over time. Effective feedback is super important because the more feedback women receive in the workplace, the more they can get better. And feedback is a two-way street, so really, women in the room, ask for effective and equitable feedback. We won't have time to run into the details here, but there's vast surveys that demonstrate that women's feedback tends to talk about things like being helpful or being supportive or being very nice to work with. That doesn't help you get promoted. So when people give you feedback about she's very helpful, she's very supportive, she's very nice, push back and say, okay, how did I impact the business? Because you want to get more quantitative feedback that's going to help you get promoted. Things you can do as well is be an active supporter. So if you hear of an opportunity for what I call glamour work, which is working on a high visibility project with management, and you know they're looking for someone, ask, can she join the work, can she join the project? Or if you hear there is a speaking opportunity, for example, ask if a woman in your team can join and speak. And also being a mentor, I love that one because I have mentors, I have male mentors, and what I love is that I learn from my meetings with them as much as they learn from me. So it's a two-way, it's a mentor-mentee relationship. And so, you know, having mentors, people who you spend time with, but also you talk about your work, your achievements, you ask them for feedback, it's going to go a very long way. And then just last but not least, recommendations and promotion. Again, we won't have time to dive into the details today, but a lot of the time when women ask about recommendation, they get sort of a half kind of mild recommendation, like, yeah, she was good, yeah, but she was okay. So really when you get these types of recommendations, they push back and ask for a wholehearted recommendation. So either you get a really good recommendation or you don't get one. We don't want sort of mild recommendations. And check that women are in fact being promoted on potential, not performance. Again, a lot of survey out there, we won't have time to dive into it, but a lot of survey research has found that men tend to be hired on and promoted on potential, but women tend to be hired and promoted on proof. So typically, when a woman will come for a promotion, she will get asked questions about, can you demonstrate you've done that before? Can you walk us through what you've done before to get that promotion? Whereas men will get asked questions about, how do you see yourself doing that? Or their potentials. It's really important to have that in mind when we talk about promotions. So in summary, because I'm getting reminded that I only have 4 minutes left, what's in it for leaders to champion women at work? It encourages more diversity of thoughts, creativity, innovation in your team. It helps you to learn about women's experiences and points of view. It helps you create a better employer brand, attract and retain more diverse talent. It helps you open doors to more market routes, things you haven't thought about before. And it helps you spot diverse talent. So there's a lot of positives in championing women in the workplace. So to summarize, some things you can do to becoming an ally today: speak up, challenge bias when you see, champion 5 people at work, and define or refresh your values. Decide how you want to operate and when you will push back. So I want to finish this session by asking you one question, and I hope you will think about an answer. Out of all the things we discussed today, what's the one action, just one, you will take to champion women at work? Just think about it. So I'm available for questions. I think we might have a few minutes left. I'm just looking at, we have a few minutes left? Maybe you can take 1 or 2 questions. One question here.
Hello. Thank you for the presentation. It was very insightful. My question in particular is about when you are an active ally and you see things happening in the workplace and you speak up. Have you been in a situation before where speaking up backfired, and what was your, go-to strategy in, navigating conflict, or your go-to conflict resolution method?
Yeah, it's a good question. So if you haven't heard, it's about backfire. Speaking of backfire. I guess it can. So some of the advice I guess I would give is, first of all, I'll try to do it in a one-to-one setting. So if I would speak about something I see, I wouldn't really raise it maybe in a group setting. Try to find the right place and the right time, and either take the one person to a side and try to speak to them. I wouldn't raise that in a group type of scenario because it could make people feel a bit that's not the right place. If that doesn't work, or if that backfires, escalate to HR, which is it's always something you try not to do, but if you do as a last resort. I like to think if it's a healthy work environment, they would take it seriously and do the right things. If it's not a very healthy work environment, they might just put it under the carpet and say that's not that important. So sometimes it can backfire, but I would say from what I've seen, when it backfires, it's not a very healthy work environment. So try to find another job if you can. One more question.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'd be very interested in getting your advice on sometimes the internalized misogyny actually amongst women in some workplaces. So I've seen it, to be honest, a personal experience of women that have actually been above me and maybe line managed me. Yeah. And I've always been so surprised by the lack of support that some women have actually given whenever me and my friends or colleagues on a peer-to-peer level being so incredibly supportive of one another. What advice would you give to actually, I don't really know how to word it right, but I just wonder what advice that you would give in that situation?
Yeah, I think the question you're asking is, what if some women are not very supportive of other women? Yeah, and it does happen. The one advice, I don't know how much time I have, the one advice I would give is try to find something you have in common with the person. I know it sounds strange, but try that person who is not very supportive of you, who is a bit, not here. Try to find what drives her. What is she? Does she want a promotion? Does she want to get the next big job? And try to find what you have in common with her. You'll be surprised sometimes when you find that one thing you have in common and you align to that, things can happen. So that's the advice I would give. Not always possible, but sometimes it is. Time out. Okay, I'm being told time out. Thank you so much. I'm still around if you have any questions. Thank you.